For years, Europeans stepped off planes at American airports with a firm belief. America might be rich, powerful, and a technology leader, but its airports were outdated, chaotic, and embarrassing. The bitter truth was that they were right. LaGuardia was once called a third-world facility. Many US airports plunged deep down the rankings, and Americans had to bow their heads to those mockeries. But then, America did what Europe never expected. They did not just patch up a few walls. They tore down, rebuilt, and erected a brand new generation of airports. Meanwhile, many of Europe's famous gateways grew increasingly cramped, overloaded, and trapped in the reputation of their own past. So how did this role reversal happen? And why are Europeans themselves starting to admit it now, when US airports were once the embarrassment of a superpower? For years, many European travelers stepping off a plane in the United States arrived with a clear preconception. America might lead in technology and business, but its airports looked like they were stuck in the past. That impression formed immediately upon landing. Low ceilings, dim lighting, old waiting chairs, and few power outlets. After a long flight, passengers continued to stand in lengthy lines before immigration and security screening. For someone who had just left Munich, Amsterdam, or Zurich, the contrast was hard to ignore. In many European cities, airports connected directly to subways and railways. Meanwhile, at many US gateways, passengers still had to rely on taxis or rental cars. The most painful part was that this perception had factual backing. In 2014, 4 European airports ranked in the top 10 best in the world. No US airport appeared in that group. New York JFK ranked 61st, while Chicago O'Hare dropped to 96th. For Americans, that was more than just a bad ranking. It felt like a public insult. The nation that had put humans on the moon and created Silicon Valley could not build an air gateway worthy of its reputation. LaGuardia became the clearest symbol of that embarrassment. The airport was once described as cramped, dark, and chronically congested. The terminal felt like a structure patched together over and over again rather than a gateway to New York. In February 2014, even Vice President Joe Biden stated that if someone were blindfolded and dropped into LaGuardia, they might think they were in a third-world country. 2 years later, Donald Trump continued to use LaGuardia, JFK, Newark, and Los Angeles as evidence of the decline of American infrastructure. If the nation's own leaders criticized their airports, why wouldn't Europeans believe they were superior? Yet the issue was not that Americans did not know how to build airports. Many major terminals were designed when passenger volumes were low, security was simple, and technological demands were minimal. As traffic increased, they were not completely rebuilt, only expanded piecemeal. A corridor was bolted on, a screening area squeezed in, a new structure grafted onto the old terminal. After September 11th, layers of security were continually stuffed into spaces lacking adequate room. The airport still functioned, but like a house that had been added onto one too many times. That was the root of the perception. Europeans did not think America was poor. They thought America was too rich, too powerful, and too proud to accept airports like those. For Americans, this was a wound deeper than a few old seats or a leaky roof. Airports are the nation's primary gateway. For years, that gateway made a superpower look smaller than itself. The silent reconstruction that changed American airports. For years, LaGuardia was a name Americans rushed to say before changing the subject. It was not just an old airport. It was living proof of the taunt that America had lost its ability to build works worthy of itself. But then a very American thing happened. When embarrassment lasts long enough, it stops being something to excuse. It becomes a mandate for action. America began to change, not by repainting a few walls or replacing new rows of seats. The old mindset was to patch things up wherever they broke. The new mindset was to view the entire airport as an obsolete system and rebuild it from the foundation. The terminals, internal roadways, pick-up and drop-off zones, baggage flows, security screening areas, and the way people move through each space. This was no longer a cosmetic campaign. It was surgery performed while the patient was still running. LaGuardia proved this level of ruthlessness best. An $8 billion reconstruction program marked the first time in over 25 years that a major airport in the United States was comprehensively rebuilt. The hard-to-believe part was that the airport could not close down and wait a few years before reopening. Planes still had to take off, passengers still had to pass through, while the old terminals were replaced one by one. Americans essentially built another airport right on top of an active one. Yet LaGuardia was not the sole exception. JFK entered a redevelopment program of about $19 billion. Newark replaced its old Terminal A with a $2.7 billion project. On the West Coast, Los Angeles deployed improvement programs scaling up to tens of billions of dollars. Those construction sites showed that America was no longer handling individual cracks. They were changing the entire skeleton. The shift also lay in how Americans organize money and responsibility. Governments, airlines, investors, and operators were forced to sit at the same table, sharing capital, risk, and deadlines. For LaGuardia alone, the majority of the cost came from private partners. That was a pragmatic decision. If a national symbol had become a disgrace, fixing it could not remain trapped in decades-long promises. So why do many Europeans not realize that America has changed? Because preconceptions always move slower than concrete and steel. In the minds of many travelers, LaGuardia remains the image of low ceilings, dark corridors, and the mockery of 2014. Furthermore, many international visitors arrive in New York via JFK or Newark, while the most apparent metamorphosis has been taking place at LaGuardia. The greatest transformation thus appeared right before the eyes of Americans, yet remained outside the familiar itineraries of many European travelers. The pandemic also disrupted travel right as new terminals successively emerged. When travelers returned, they still carried the memories of an America from years past. But that memory has become dangerous because it causes people to mistake silence for immobility. While the world was still laughing with old stories, America was quietly pouring capital, tearing down, digging foundations, and rebuilding its most crucial gateways. This makeover does not prove America never weakened. On the contrary, the strength lies in the fact that Americans can look a public failure in the eye, accept the embarrassment, and turn it into momentum. A country once asked whether it still had the capability to do big things answered not with slogans, but with cranes, construction sites, and billions of dollars genuinely laid down. LaGuardia once made Americans bow their heads. Now that very place is making them hold them high. And when the final construction barriers are taken down, the question is no longer whether America can catch up. The new question is, while everyone was still looking at the past, what did America build? What makes American airports now entirely different from Europe's? Imagine a European fan who has just endured a long transatlantic flight. In his mind, America is still defined by those airports once mocked: low ceilings, dark corridors, old seats, and weary lines. He braces himself for a chaotic experience, but when the aircraft door opens, that memory begins to collapse. The space ahead is wider than he expected. Light floods through massive glass walls. A cool breeze envelops his body after hours inside the cabin. This is no longer the America of old stories. The first sensation is not quite admiration, it is confusion. For years, Europeans grew accustomed to believing their airports were sophisticated, while US airports were merely giant machines serving cars. That preconception once had basis. Yet while many European hubs still crammed new technology into old terminals, the United States began erecting a layer of airports from scratch. The most noticeable difference is scale. Many major European airports are surrounded by cities and residential areas. Each expansion can trigger years of debates. Meanwhile, the United States is a continental-scale nation. Distances between major cities reach thousands of kilometers, making airports not just international gateways but the connective tissue of the domestic economy. Dallas-Fort Worth is the clearest image. This airport spans nearly 70 square kilometers, larger than Manhattan. It features roadways, internal transit systems, and a fire department, operating much like a miniature city. To a European, DFW feels like a metropolis built around an airport. That scale does not exist merely to overwhelm. A person can wake up in New York, hold a meeting in Dallas, and sleep in Los Angeles while remaining in the same country. The runways stretch toward the horizon because American airports form the circulatory system of a massive market. Europeans do not just see concrete. They are witnessing the true dimensions of America. At security screening, the difference appears in a more interesting way. Liquid limits before security in the US and the European Union are actually nearly identical. Each container generally must not exceed roughly 100 milliliters. America is not more lenient. The difference lies in how Americans respond to inconvenience. Retailers and brands quickly find ways to turn those restrictions into a service. During the 2026 World Cup, ranch dressing unexpectedly became a souvenir hunted by many international fans. When large bottles terminals could not pass security and carry on luggage, shops at certain airports began selling them past the screening checkpoints. Travelers complete screening and then buy ranch bottles to carry onto the aircraft. A minor problem is solved through agility, commercial sense, and a very American touch of humor. That detail shows the new American airport no longer treats passengers merely as bodies needing control and transit. They are treated as customers with needs and cultural curiosity. Many European airports boast luxury shopping, but the experience often remains transactional. In the US, a small purchase becomes a trip memory. The difference is also felt physically. Step into a terminal in Texas, Florida, or Georgia in the middle of summer. Outside, heat rises off the tarmac. But once the glass doors close, a cool airflow immediately envelops the passenger. In American infrastructure philosophy, air conditioning is not just a convenience. It is a commitment that outside weather must not dictate indoor comfort. Not every American airport is perfect, but many new terminals were designed in an era where temperature, lighting, and human traffic were factored straight from the blueprints. Travelers do not need technical understanding. Their bodies feel it first. Then they step out into the arrivals hall, and the true climax begins. During the 2026 World Cup, US airports prepared not just to handle extra flights and suitcases. They prepared to welcome guests. Tens of thousands of tournament volunteers assisted across multiple locations, including airports and hotels. In Houston, passengers encountered multilingual staff, volunteers, signage, and an atmosphere of football right inside the terminal. An experience zone in Terminal B broadcast matches and provided seating for fans the moment they landed. At DFW, travelers could join interactive activities and receive limited edition souvenirs. Elsewhere, brands organized games, photo booths, and giveaways. This was no longer about hanging a few flags and calling it a welcome. It was a deliberate hospitality machine. The contrast lies in the feeling. At many European airports, travelers arrive and are directed by the system on where to go. In America, they are also reminded that their presence matters. There are greeters, wayfinding volunteers, and spaces that immediately convey that the city is hosting a major event. Brands do not just sit on billboards, they try to hand travelers a gift or a story to take home. At this point, Europeans begin to understand the transformation goes beyond glass, steel, and acreage. America is turning its airports into the nation's premier stage. LaGuardia used to be a place America had to apologize for. Now it is recognized as one of the best airports in America, with Terminal B earning a 5-star rating. Newark Terminal A received a similar evaluation. Those accolades do not erase every queue or delayed flight, but they end a taunt that lasted too long, that Americans no longer knew how to build world-class gateways. For Americans, this is the sweetest form of vindication. There is no need to deny past criticisms, because they were once true. What makes the victory satisfying is that America listened, endured the humiliation, spent the money, and changed the reality. While outside prejudices remain stuck in LaGuardia in 2014, the real LaGuardia has entered another era. And when a European traveler pulls a suitcase through the expansive terminal, feels the cool airflow, gazes down the stretching runways, buys an American item past security, and gets greeted by volunteers at arrivals, he is not just seeing a new airport. He is witnessing a role reversal. Europe once stepped down into America with the feeling of arriving from the future. Now growing numbers must pause and wonder whether that future quietly crossed the Atlantic somewhere along the way. And the answer lies in the very concrete details they are about to admit. Why Europe cannot simply build new airports. Yet if America has changed so rapidly, an uncomfortable question immediately arises. What is happening on the other side of the Atlantic? Europe does not lack money, engineers, or experience. Many of its airports once set the standard for the entire world to follow. The problem is that these facilities now bear passenger volumes far larger than when they were designed. In 2025 alone, Europe's airport system handled approximately 2.6 billion travelers. There are more people and more frequent flights, but terminal areas, gates, and runways cannot expand at a matching pace. The inconvenience is therefore glaring. Corridors that were wide enough 20 years ago now feature long, dragging lines of suitcases. Security zones originally intended for a few hundred people must process vastly greater numbers. Gates run out of space, forcing passengers down staircases onto buses to reach airplanes. The airports still function, but like a fine garment that has simply become too tight. So why don't they simply build new ones? Because many major hubs sit right next to dense cities. Surrounding them are residential homes, highways, rail lines, and communities that have existed for generations. Adding a single runway can demand land acquisition, road relocation, fierce opposition over noise and climate impact, and years of litigation. Heathrow is the clearest example. Britain's busiest airport has only 2 runways that are nearly at full capacity. The idea of building a 3rd runway has spanned multiple governments, been approved, then cancelled, faced lawsuits and protests, and as of 2026 remains stuck in consultation processes. At Heathrow, before anyone asks what to build, they must ask what needs to be moved. Schiphol faces a different version. The airport has multiple runways, but finds itself caught between the demand for increased flights and mandates to reduce noise for local residents. The Dutch government previously attempted to cap flight numbers, only for that decision to get swept up in legal battles. The limits of European airports thus lie not just in physical space, but within the web of social obligations surrounding them. What about renovations? They can make floors newer, signs brighter, and shopping areas more attractive, but they cannot easily manufacture new runways, push cities further away, or alter layouts formed over decades. Nor can an airport close for a few years to rebuild from scratch. They must patch things section by section, while millions of people keep walking through. The result is often a new area linked to an old one, a new corridor pouring into an old bottleneck, while passengers navigate a more beautifully decorated maze. This is the moment Americans begin to feel a sense of vindication, and it is a well-founded one. Europe once looked at America's aging airports and assumed that degradation reflected the country as a whole. Today, many of Europe's renowned hubs are similarly held back by their own pasts. They still carry brand name and prestige. But prestige does not widen corridors, create new gates, or make a decades-long project finish any faster. Saying that all European airports are in decline would be an overstatement. Europe still boasts many exceptional gateways. Yet one thing is increasingly hard to deny. Some airports that once represented the future are now living off a reputation built in the past, while physical and political constraints become ever more apparent. That is the ultimate paradox. America was once mocked for letting its airports deteriorate for too long, but that very embarrassment gave it the nerve to start over. Europe led for so long that many places still believe one more round of renovations will be enough. Perhaps the issue is not that Europe does not know what needs to be done. The issue is that it has known for too long, yet still cannot do it. When Europeans begin to complain about their own airports, Europeans have not stood before cameras to declare that their airports are falling behind. But they have admitted it in a much more authentic way, through the stories they tell after every trip. Some people fly a short leg from London to Amsterdam, but the time spent waiting for immigration is longer than the flight itself. Ahead is a long line of passengers, including the elderly and young children, while only a few control booths are operating. The flight has ended, but the journey has not truly begun. In Paris, a passenger has 3 hours to make a connection. That sounds plenty, but nearly all that time is swallowed up by walking between terminals, finding the right gate, and standing through consecutive queues. Even finding a restroom becomes part of a race. The airport no longer transports people, it forces them to decode it themselves. That is why more and more people say they are willing to pay extra, choose longer itineraries, or switch airlines just to avoid connecting at certain famous gateways. This is a very costly admission. When passengers actively spend more to bypass an airport, the issue is no longer a single queue. It has become a loss of reputation. Even more painful is the feeling of locals returning home. Someone has just left a clean, bright, and easy-to-navigate airport in Northern Europe, only to land in their homeland and feel like they are stepping into an old industrial park. They are not just annoyed, they feel embarrassed because their city's gateway no longer reflects the modern image the city still promotes to the world. At many airports in Britain and Germany, complaints repeat in a similar pattern. Terminals are too small for the crowds, security areas are unpredictable, staff are stressed, and passengers must arrive earlier than reasonable. Some arrive 3 hours early, yet still do not know if they will make their flight. Some must sprint to their gate after bags and electronics are repeatedly held for screening. The scary part is not just being delayed, it is the feeling of being unable to control one's own journey. Therefore, the most common questions among Europeans are no longer whether an airport is beautiful. They ask how early to arrive, how long the security line is today, whether to buy fast-track access, and whether the connection time is enough to survive the terminal maze. That is the clearest admission. Europeans have not unanimously declared that American airports have pulled ahead, but they are organizing entire trips around avoiding, preparing for, and enduring the limitations of their own airports. For Americans, no victory statement could be greater than that. When people who once looked across the Atlantic with pity now have to pay extra to avoid their own homeland gateways, the role reversal speaks for itself. Finally, this story is not just about American or European airports. It is about how a nation reacts when the symbols that once made it proud begin to grow obsolete. America was once mocked, and those mockeries were justified. But instead of remaining defensive, Americans turned shame into construction sites, criticism into billions of dollars of investment, and rebuilt the nation's most vital gateways. Meanwhile, many European airports still carry the illustrious reputations of the past, while increasingly struggling with cramped terminals, tangled procedures, and constraints that are difficult to untangle. The thought-provoking question is this: does a nation's strength lie in never falling behind, or in the capacity to recognize that it has fallen behind and remain resolute enough to change? What about you? Which airport has surprised you the most, for better or for worse? And in your experience, has America truly pulled ahead, or is Europe merely going through a temporary rough patch? Share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes the clearest sign of a nation's future appears right where you just stepped off the plane.